Hey guys, welcome to the Men's Voices Ireland podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about false accusations. Now, on the podcast with me today is the chairperson of Men's Voices Ireland, David Walsh. How are you doing, David?
Good day, Jeff. Keep well, yeah.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. So, first off, I think it's important to start off with definitions because when we talk about false accusations, what exactly are we talking about? What is a false accusation?
A false accusation is where someone says you have committed an offence when you have not done so, quite simply.
Yeah, so it's essentially where, like with regard to rape and sexual assault, it's pretty much where an accusation of rape has...
Or rape or sexual assault has taken place where in fact it didn't take place, where there was consent.
Where there was consent, or even if the sexual activity didn't happen at all.
Or it didn't happen at all, correct.
So I think a kind of a common phrase that we always hear is, why do women lie? Why would a woman lie? So what would be kind of the general reasons why false accusations are made?
Well, some women may lie out of sheer notoriety, the wish to be noticed. That's a common thing. A woman may feel that she has committed a sexual indiscretion, and she may feel the following morning she made a mistake. Yeah. So she wants to cover it up. And human beings there's human weakness. That's the human condition, so people can actually tell lies about things.
Yeah, I think Christina Hoff-Sommers kind of puts it well. It's not that women lie because they're women, they lie because they're human. And human beings sometimes lie.
That's right.
Especially about sex.
They do.
Men lie about sex fucking all the time.
They do. Yeah.
Okay, so I think one of the most important points when it comes to false accusations is the impact on the accused.
Right.
What is the impact on the accused?
Yeah.
Of rape and of false accusations of rape and sexual assault?
Yeah. Let me begin by citing some preliminaries. The climate today surrounding a charge of rape or sexual assault on an accused person, that climate can be very hostile today. Yeah. Now, while rape is a heinous offence, the accused person is still entitled to presumption of innocence and is entitled to due process of law. But the attendant publicity around this can often create a climate in which the onus seems to switch from the prosecution to the onus seems to be put on the defendant to prove his innocence rather than on the prosecution to prove his guilt.
So it's almost like guilty until proven innocent rather than innocent until proven guilty.
That's right, yeah. That's part of the problem. And this kind of thing has been amplified by social media. The hashtags for Me Too and Believe the Woman have contributed to this feverish atmosphere where the social media then piles on the pressure on the accused person. And this can be particularly fierce in the US. I want to mention two cases in Ireland the last 2 years. In one case, a man who was falsely accused of rape is now suing the state for compensation, having spent a year in jail. It turned out that his accuser had, 18 months previous to that, falsely accused another man of rape and had later withdrawn the charge. But she was never prosecuted for this false charge. A second case took place only last April in Belfast. An authentic man was cleared after he and his family had been brought to the brink of despair by a false charge of rape. The woman who confessed to making the false charge was given a 12-month suspended sentence. Now, all this shows that the state does not take false charges anything like as seriously as it does the charge of rape or sexual assault itself.
Yeah.
And the behaviour of the state can even contribute to the making of false charges simply by the way it ignores, it essentially ignores false charges themselves. It's clear that the impact on accused persons can be devastating when the charge is completely false. It can be absolutely devastating. And the person can be, of course, given a long jail sentence. The average sentence for rape today is about 10 years. And it has been increasing over the last 10, 15 years. Even when the accusation is unfounded, the impact on the accused person who has been now acquitted can still be enormous, as the outcome of the Belfast trial in 2018 showed. The two rugby players at the centre of that trial were forced to leave the province because of the hostile publicity, and both had their careers seriously damaged or even ruined as a result.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
Like, they went overseas, but like they never played for Ireland again.
That's right.
That was actually quite an interesting case, because I actually do remember the day where kind of the verdict was kind of read out, and I want to be honest, I was actually quite surprised by it because I actually thought they were guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that might have been kind of still a bias against the accused.
Yeah.
Because I think society sees rape as such a serious case that, and we always hear how false accusations are so rare that that whenever we hear of a rape case, we go, "Oh, it must be true."
Yeah.
It's almost like a bias that general society has.
Yeah, but it has been whipped up in recent years because of the social media hashtags, the fact that social media has become such a huge influence now, and it has brought about a case where people get together on social media and decide we're going to go for this person. They pile on the pressure. And it's immaterial whether the person is guilty or innocent. They want to get that person anyway.
Yeah. So to move on, I think is the attrition rate is for rape and sexual assault is definitely brings up an interesting question, because what the actual figures show isn't really what we're being told or what they show. A lot of people kind of say that a lot of cases that are brought to court, the vast majority of them don't end in conviction.
Yeah.
But yet the actual figures would show quite a different story, wouldn't they?
Yeah. You see, a problem with this type of crime, with rape or sexual assault, is that there are hardly ever any witnesses.
Yeah.
So it's one person's word against another. And it's often very difficult to tell which one is telling the truth. But as well as that, many reports to the police do not meet the level where a file is prepared and sent to the DPP. It can be for a number of reasons. Either the police find that there's almost no evidence whatsoever, or there is no evidence. Another reason might be that the police don't actually believe the complainant and decide that they will dismiss the report.
Yeah.
But of those cases that are sent to the DPP office itself may decide that there isn't a sufficient weight of evidence to sustain a conviction, so they may not take the case to court either. So this means that there is a high attrition rate, and as I say, it's largely due to the fact that there are hardly ever any witnesses.
Yeah.
That's major part of the problem. But this has been interpreted by the Rape Crisis Network Ireland to mean that there is a very low conviction rate for rape.
Yeah, and that's what, like, when you say conviction rate, that means cases have gone to trial.
You see, there's ambiguity about what that means as well. It's not clear what they mean by there is a very low conviction rate for rape. The proper way to measure the conviction rate for rape is to ask what is the ratio of convictions obtained compared to the total number of charges pressed. And in this case, the conviction rate for rape in Ireland of cases taken to court is very high. It's over 80%.
That's not something you hear.
No, you don't. You hear, Chad. You hear figures from the RCNI at something like 2%. But this may simply be the take account of all of the report cases to the police, including all those that were simply dismissed for lack of evidence in the first place. So that's not a realistic way to judge a conviction rate at all. The advent of DNA evidence.
Yeah, and this is something I've kind of noticed as well.
Yeah,
DNA has really had a big impact on these.
Has brought about a big improvement in the way cases, in way convictions are found, or lack of convictions, for that matter. It has cases that were previously deemed insoluble have now become more soluble. In the US, before DNA, many men spent years or even decades in jail for crimes, rapes they did not commit. The Innocence Project in the US has case files of many cases, rape cases, which were found after the conviction had been obtained to be false, due to DNA evidence being found. There have been more exonerations for DNA around sexual assault than for all other crimes combined. More DNA exonerations for sexual assault than all other crimes combined. That's the impact, one of the impacts that the DNA has had on these particular types of offence. I'd like to talk about two cases in the US in the last 25 years. They typify the official attitude and the often shoddy manner in which convictions are obtained there. Anthony Broadwater spent 16 years in jail for a rape he did not commit. He was identified by the woman at the centre of the case after she had previously failed to pick him out in a previous ID parade. And this discrepancy, as well as other discrepancies in the evidence, were simply ignored at the trial. Ignored. It wasn't until a particular person took an interest in the case some years later and pursued it independently that it was found that Broadwater had been falsely convicted. A second case was that of Brian Banks. Brian Banks was accused of rape by a classmate of his. In his case, there was no DNA evidence, but he spent 5 years in jail and another 5 years under strict custody parole before the woman confessed. He was released at that point.
Because I have actually read quite a bit on that case. He had to wear an ankle tracker, an ankle bracelet.
Yeah.
And then what really kind of started off the whole thing of like a chance for him to kind of show that he was innocent was that the accuser, the woman that accused him, sent him a friend request on Facebook. That's how that started. And then he kind of then went to the Innocence Project, who you see, normally the Innocence Project only deals with people who are actually incarcerated, that are actually in prison.
Yeah.
But the reason they took on Brian Banks specifically is because he kind of showed them the ankle bracelet and goes like, I am not free.
I'm not free.
And so they took on that case, and it was with the help that he was able to get her to confess.
Confess, yeah. Yeah.
So
that's right.
It's a really interesting case.
Yeah, it is. And then, of course, there was the notorious Duke Lacrosse case back in 2006, in which I think it was 3 men were falsely accused of rape.
Yeah.
And no such rape had occurred. And it turned out that the state attorney had himself implicated himself in the case by contributing to their conviction, or attempting to gain a conviction.
He conspired with a private lab.
He conspired with a private lab, yeah, to bring about a conviction of these men.
And what actually happened there was the attorneys for the accused actually came out and they looked and they kind of really researched DNA. And when they actually had the DNA expert from that private lab, they actually pretty much outsmarted him on DNA.
Right.
So, and they actually got that expert to admit that he'd colluded with that district attorney. So it was a really interesting case, that one.
Yeah. Before we finish there, just to mention, the state attorney was himself disbarred from practice because of the way he had conducted that case.
And as far as I'm aware, he was actually imprisoned.
Was he?
Yeah. I think it was just for 1 day, which was a bit pathetic in my view, but something. So I think what really kind of shows kind of how false accusations can kind of be encouraged is, and how that can be systematic, is the Crown Prosecution Service scandal over in the UK. So how did that kind of, what was the story around that? Because I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about.
It is, yeah. The hostile attitude of the media that I mentioned at the outset found an echo in the attitude of the police in this case. There was a policy, an instruction issued to the Met Police by their Chief Commissioner to automatically believe the woman.
Yeah.
And this was in practice for a number of years until it was rescinded in 2018 following the collapse of about 4 high-profile rape charges. The rape charges collapsed because evidence was disclosed at the very last minute, which showed that the charges were completely false. They were malicious. And it turned out that the evidence which brought about this collapse had not been made known to the defence until the very, very last moment in the case. It's not coincidental that the head of the Crown Prosecution Service at that time was a woman named Alison Saunders, who gained notoriety for herself when she was exposed, I think it was by the Office of National Statistics, she claimed that the number of rape convictions for a certain period was double the true rate. And she was informed of this fact by the Office of National Statistics. This was the way she handled it. She was utterly biased, it turns out. I'd like to mention before leaving this, there's a woman called Diana Davison in Canada. She's the founder of what is known as the Lighthouse Project, which is a project which takes up false narratives. It clues into particular cases which she believes that there was a false narrative allowed here. And Diana Davison has given some of the tricks that are used by false accusers, such as when they're under cross-examination, they become upset. And then they look for a video link, and then suddenly a medical condition which was previously not disclosed is suddenly invoked by her defence. These are some of the tricks that can be used.
Yeah, it is quite interesting because I think that really kind of shows the bias, not just within kind of institutions like the CPS, but also with the media about kind of bias against those accused of kind of rape. So
That's right.
It's a really interesting thing. Now, I think an important issue to kind of bring up is consent.
Yeah.
Because I think it's kind of really understanding and kind of misunderstanding of consent by a lot of people is kind of what makes kind of, how can I put this? What makes them kind of unsure about what actually happens. So, what is kind of the issue around consent?
Yeah. Yeah. The question of consent has added further complexity to the whole rape question, since the definition of consent was given in the Criminal Law Sexual Offences Act of 2017, which gave a definition of consent there. And the issue turns on whether or not consent was given to the Act. And it also turns on the meaning of that, what consent means as well. The matter is further complicated by the fact that very often the two people involved taking a large quantity of alcohol. Maybe a large amount of alcohol is being consumed by both parties. And in this case, the whole question of consent becomes very vague and vague indeed, and extraordinary, because naturally their recollection of the events is vague, and it's grey, it's shady, and they can't remember properly what happened. So in that sort of case, it's difficult to decide. But a problem about this is that in many cases, the woman who is under the influence of alcohol can be deemed incapable of consent, but the man is never deemed incapable of consent.
It's something that's not enforced equally.
Not at all. It's completely one-sided. It's completely one-sided. It has to be remembered, again, like I mentioned earlier, it has to be remembered that when a large amount of alcohol is concerned, the possibility for misunderstanding to arise is enormous. It's greatly increased by the circumstances of the case. But going back to the issue of rape itself, it must be remembered that rape in Irish law is built around a female victim, rape of a female. And under Irish law and under normal heterosexual intercourse, it's not possible for a man to be raped.
I do remember reading it once, and it did say under one of the areas that part of it is this is a gender specific law.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. But an important fact here is that in certain states in the US, it is recognised that a man can be raped, and there have been convictions on that score. And it looks likely that this is spreading rather than contracting. This notion of male rape because now in surveys which are conducted around violence of various kinds in intimate relationships, sexual violence, so on, it's now increasingly recognised that many men can be sexually assaulted or even raped. That is increasingly becoming clear in the surveys that are being conducted today.
And just to go briefly into that, in what ways is it rape? Because I do know there's something called made to penetrate.
Yes, that's exactly it. There is now an offence called made to penetrate, and that's exactly the situation where a man can be made to penetrate by his partner. That's exactly it. And
one kind of argument I have had when when this has kind of come up in conversations, is this idea that if a man is able to get an erection, then obviously he must consent. But that actually isn't true, because a male can actually be made to reach orgasm by physical stimulus alone, even if he's not actually agreeing to it.
Yeah.
And it's actually the same with women. A woman can be made to orgasm through physical stimulus alone. Yeah. It's not something that's really looked at, is it?
No, I'm not an expert. I haven't read about this at all, Jeff, so I know absolutely nothing about it. But I do know, I mean, that this particular offence called made to penetrate is now increasingly becoming evident in surveys being conducted on sexual assault right across the United States. And I think there was a film made some years ago in which a man was made to penetrate, wasn't there? What was that? Was that Demi Moore was in it? And I forget the name of the film now. But in any case, I think it did. Another thing about rape is the notion of stranger rape now is now less common than rape by an acquaintance. The more commonly now around rape cases is where the question is whether or not there was a consent given. The question is the question at issue is whether the question is whether the consent was given or not, and this is where both people actually know each other.
Yeah. So I think it's next up we should really kind of go into kind of rates of false accusations. So I think getting kind of an accurate number of how many accusations of rape and sexual assault are actually false and how many are true, I think it's very difficult to get an accurate number on that. So why is that?
Well, it's easy enough to understand if you recall something we said earlier, that in many cases of reports to police where a complaint is made of rape, the police don't actually believe the report, because the report might not be a coherent one. Or there might be internal contradictions in the report after questioning, and they simply dismiss the case, and they don't even bother charging the person with a false accusation. So these cases don't enter into the reckoning at all. So, and there may be quite a few of these cases anyway. We'll see that.
I do think that kind of it's definitions of what a false accusation is.
What a false accusation is. That's right.
And when it comes into those kind of reports that look for a number, generally the definition isn't really good. Yeah.
You see, you can ask the question: does a false accusation rate of 8%? Does that represent the ratio between the number of false accusations which were successfully prosecuted by the police compared to the total number of prosecutions for rape at the time? Or is it even more wild than that? Is it compared to the total number of rapes reported to the police, which could be very, very much bigger? And that would give a totally spurious and useless figure for false accusations. So I'd like to just mention a word. There was a 2009 report, Rape and Justice in Ireland report, which found that the Gardaí and the DPP had decided that in Ireland the rate of false accusations may be around 6%. The FBI in the US has given a figure for unfounded rapes, and these are rapes that are found to be false under investigation to be 8%. And I've seen two other studies in the US which found rates of between 5 and 10% for false accusations. You can find much higher rates if you look for them, but you have to be very careful here, because, as I say, there is there is, by definition, there is a huge amount of uncertainty around this figure in the first place.
Again, like when it shows, like I think when it shows like the really high ones, like, I think there was one quite a few years ago saying like the 40% of rape accusations were false.
Yeah.
But I think it was the definition of false of a false accusation was so broad that it was pretty much useless.
Yeah. You have to be. It's better to be cautious here. But I'd like, before we finish, I'd like to mention that two German criminologists, Wiebke Steffen and Erich Elstner, conducted an investigation of all 1,754 rape complaints that were made to police in Bavaria in the year 2000. Now, the police judged that a third of these complaints were probably false, but they didn't pursue them. Probably not true. No prosecution was taken in about half the complaints that were made. But in 7.4% of the cases, where the complainants were actually investigated for making a false accusation by the police. 7.4% of cases, the complainant was actually investigated for making a false complaint by the police. And in every single one of these cases, the woman confessed that she had lied. So that was a figure of 7.4% at the very least in Bavaria in the year 2000. It's interesting also to recall what the Bavarian police did. They pursued these cases in 3/4 of them. They followed these up with charges in 3/4 of those cases.
Of those 7.5?
Of that 7.4% of cases.
Of that.
Yeah, the police followed them up and brought false accusation charges. And in the case of the other 25%, the police let them off because of they reckon they were mentally impaired or something like that, mentally unstable.
There was a bit of they didn't want to go out and go actually they were innocent, did they?
Yeah. Well, they were unstable. They could have been unstable. Yeah.
So I think kind of to finish up, what changes do you think needs to be made to kind of reduce the frequency and kind of the damage of false accusations?
Yeah, what we would like to do is see a certain number of changes made in the law. In the first place, as I have emphasised, we want the police to take the issue of false accusations much more seriously, because as I've said, it's very rare to have a term of imprisonment imposed when a false accusation is sustained in court. It's very rare. That does nothing to discourage false accusations. If anything, it may encourage them.
It encourages, because if they make a false accusation and they're caught, well, I won't be punished anyway.
Yeah. So we want those cases to be properly followed up, and we want sentences to be imposed which are commensurate with the charge itself in the first place, whether that was a charge of rape or whether it is a charge of sexual assault. We want charges or terms of imprisonment sentences imposed which are commensurate with the charge itself. That is one thing we would like to see happen.
I've heard some people kind of online go that though, like, if a woman does falsely accuse and it's proven that it was a false accusation, that she should get what he would have gotten if he was found guilty, plus 1 year. What do you think of kind of like that kind of way of doing it? Do you think that would be effective?
I'm not going to venture an opinion here, but I would say that, as I said earlier, the average sentence for rape now is at least 10 years. It was 10 years back in 2016, and it may well have increased since then. That's a serious term of imprisonment. So the sentence for a false accusation, even if it's not 10 years, it should be at least 5 or 6 years. Another thing we would like to see is the case where a man can be sexually assaulted taken much more seriously. Now, that means looking at the current case where there's asymmetry at the moment in the way the law is devised. The law, as I say, is built around a case where a female victim.
Yeah.
That's it. But the law should consider that the male could also be a victim. That should be taken seriously. That should be seriously considered and looked at, investigated. And another thing that we would like to see done is we would like to see much more awareness made to men of the men to be made much more seriously aware of what can happen if they are charged with rape, sexual assault. They have to be very much more careful, particularly where there's a large amount of alcohol involved.
Yeah.
They have to be extremely careful. Men have to be warned about this. The risks they run compared to the risks they run are much higher when they get involved in sexual encounters in which there's a large amount of alcohol involved. The last thing I would like to see considered is the Victims of Crime Act 2017. I've already referred to that. The Victims of Crime Act 2017 talks about victims of crime, and yet no crime has to be established to show that such a person is a victim. There is no need to establish that an offence has to be committed in order for the person to be considered a victim. And now, regularly in trials, people are referred to as victims.
Yeah.
This has an obvious effect on the jury, and it has an effect on the accused person.
Yeah, and that's actually it's something I kind of noticed in kind of quite a few different cases over in America, that it's becoming more and more common that they can't refer to them as victims, or they can't refer to, like in murder cases, they can't refer to the person that's accused of murder they can't say the murderer did this. They have to say the accused did this.
Yeah, but here we have in Irish law an act enshrined in Irish law which talks about victims, and yet no crime has to have been found or established in order of which this person was a victim.
Yeah.
No crime has to be established at all, and it further stipulates that a victim is somebody who has been caused harm by a particular offence. But then it says no offence has to be established.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. It's complete nonsense.
And then if it's proven to be a false accusation, the man is not considered a victim, is he? The accused of a false accusation isn't considered a victim.
Yeah.
Because it's either they're just ignorant of the fact that there is damage caused by false accusations.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. You've gone back to the fact that false accusations are not taken as seriously at all as they should be. A man is not regarded as a victim when he's falsely accused, because there's no follow up of the crime, a false accusation, and there's no sentence imposed which is commensurate with the seriousness of the crime.
Yeah, so I think this has been quite an interesting conversation. I've learned quite a bit there. So
good.
If you want to find out more about Men's Voices Ireland, you can visit our website www.mensvoicesireland.com. You can contact us by email, mensvoicesireland@gmail.com. Now, Men's Voices Ireland does rely on donations to do the work that we do. So if you would like to donate, you can donate through the website. So it's mensvoicesireland.com/donate. You can follow us on various social media. So it's @Men's Voices on Facebook. It's Men's Voices Ireland on Instagram, and it's @mensvoices_IRL on Twitter.
Jeff, before we finish, there's something I'd like to I almost forgot to say, and that is people should now remember that there is a #Men2 campaign has been started And this is important because this is a global campaign.
Yeah, and we've been part of that.
And we're part of that. And people, men are encouraged to actually use the hashtag now when they're talking about things like these.
That's definitely, it's really come out of the whole Johnny Depp.
It has really come out of the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. That has had an enormous impact on public opinion because it was followed by millions of people worldwide.
Yeah.
And it was obviously clear that Amber Heard was a serious offender here. She did some very terrible things, and Depp was cleared. I mean she didn't pin any crime on him at all.
Yeah.
So this has had a major effect on, I think, and hopefully it will have lasting effect on public opinion.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I do hope kind of different governments kind of take that under serious consideration, because it's something that needs to be kind of brought up, that men are victims.
Exactly. It's not. It's gathering. It's gathering more force now globally, because there are more men's groups coming together from across different countries, many different countries, and they are now joining together to show just how seriously men are disadvantaged here, and how badly they're being discriminated against.
Yeah.
In this area.
So, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, thanks for listening to this episode of the Men's Voices Ireland podcast. If you like this episode, like it, share it. And also, if you want to join in the conversation, comment down below. We'd actually be really interested to hear what you guys have to say. So, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Great.